That's why the gold, the Spanish ships brought gold.
Senate will please come to order. Thank you for your patience as we were making sure to get the technology set up so we could have everybody included. Welcome, Senator Rahm Hinsdale. We will start the day with a moment of silence. Thank you. That was one of the more silent moments of silence. I'm always curious, how quiet can we get as we think? We'll move on to announcements. Are there any announcements? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. We were, as all of you know, we were out of session when the flooding happened this past summer and when follow-on flooding occurred. We are back now, and as I hope everyone knows, flooding is top of mind for us in the Senate and in the other body. And we begin that work today by bringing as our first bill to the floor S-160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage. What I will be seeking is to pull this bill off the notice calendar. You'll have a report. I think it's clear how this would benefit the affected communities. So my hope is to move the bill through all stages of passage and to message it very quickly to the House. So with that said, Mr. President, I would move that the rules be suspended in order to take up for immediate action S-160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage.
Now, the Senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to take up for action off the notice calendar S-160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to take up for immediate action S-160. S-160 was read for the first time and referred to Committee on Finance, which has indicated to support the bill, and then was reported to the Committee on Appropriations. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
S-160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage.
Now you've heard the second reading of the bill. For the report of the Committee on Finance, Senator from Washington, Senator Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's unusual for finance to be doing the first bill of the session. Usually we do the next to the last. Only the budget goes through after us. But this year, we had the flooding. Any of you who've been through downtown Montpelier, you can see the damage that's been done. And under the present law, if a town abates taxes on any property, they are obligated to pay the school tax to the state. That's in there. So we were, I guess, concerned that towns do tax stabilization agreements with businesses and developments, and we didn't want them forgiving our taxes. So if they abate taxes, they have to pay to the school. Well, for the towns that lost a great deal of property in the summer flooding, that doesn't seem quite fair. They've lost, the buildings are gone. These are not new developments. They're just gone, or they're substantially damaged. And we don't think the town should have to bear the additional economic burden of having to pay the school taxes to the state. So in section 1 of this bill, we did essentially the same things after Irene. So this is not new, it's been done before. This gives the tax commissioner the power to abate the school tax for any town that was damaged in the flood between July 1st and October 15th of 2023. In order to do this, the properties have to be a 50% loss. And we did that because that's the FEMA standard. And if we did anything else, we would have to go out and appraise all of those buildings ourselves, which would be very expensive, very time consuming, and wouldn't get done in time to help these towns this year. Then we said loss of, by the property owner of the primary structure on the property for 60 days. So if you couldn't use your property, it took you 60 days or longer to get a new furnace, to get the electricity in, to get everything mucked out, that would count. Loss of access to the property owner to utilities for the primary structure on the property for 60 days. We tried to give a little flexibility here because I know, I'm sure the people from Barry know, we had people living in houses. First floor was underwater. There was no electricity. There was no heat, but there was nowhere else for them to go except maybe a cot at the Barry Auditorium. And so they stayed in those houses. We've still got people in houses that under normal circumstances, we wouldn't want them to be in. And we didn't want to say you couldn't get a tax abatement just because you had a couple of people or you were living on the second or third floor. So loss of utilities counts. Let's see where the next one is. Okay, or if the property is condemned of the primary structure on the property under federal, state, or municipal law. And so the taxes can be abated. It goes on to say that if the towns, because the town hall was underwater, had a disruption in their ability to collect taxes, and if they in fact borrowed to pay the school taxes to the state, that they can be reimbursed a reasonable rate of interest on that borrowed money, because they now don't own the taxes. And it says, yeah, the commissioner will do all the forms, and then the commissioner will give permission to the Agency of Education to actually rebate the money. Because if the money's been sent in, then it's the Agency of Education who has the cash and has to send it back. And the abatement has to be put in or has to be done starting April 1st of last year, between April 1st of 2023 or the date of the passage of this act. This is confining it just to the flood damage this summer. And that was the bill. And then the most important part, and this is the reason we'd really like to move this along. What this bill states is that any FEMA disaster payment that you got to replace your furnace or your electricity, move your electric box up, does not count as household income when you're figuring out if you are eligible for income sensitivity on your property tax. So that goes in, and there is a deadline on that the tax commissioner would like to have this passed by. We did get we heard from Kirby Keaton, who is our new tax legislative counsel. He ran through the bill with us, but it was actually drafted by Abby Shepherd. It came out the last day she was working for us before she went to the tax department. And Julia Richter, and we got a fiscal note. The impact on the ed fund will be 1.1 million, which is not a small amount of money, but given the extent of our issues in the ed fund this year, it's not going to make any difference. We need about $200 million to get us into single digits in the ed fund. So this is very small. The vote on the committee was 601. We'd ask this body to concur.
Now you've heard the report from the Committee on Finance. The bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations. For the report of the Committee on Appropriations, Senator from Washington, Senator Perschlick.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Senate Appropriations Committee reviewed this bill. We had the sponsor come in and talk about it. There's no impact to the general fund, and the committee approved the bill, voted it out 7-0.
Now you've heard the report on the Committee on Appropriations. Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill, please?
I'm assuming the senator from Washington.
Yes.
You may.
First of all, I appreciate this bill. Obviously, there are many parts of our state that were heavily impacted by the flood. as the junior center from Addison County, which was in a little bit of different situation than many of the other counties. We had severe flooding, but it came at a different time, and we were not declared for individual assistance under FEMA. Even though several properties were fully destroyed during the early floods, Addison County was not included in the early flood declarations. So my question is about the language on page 2 of the bill as used in the subsection eligible property. Means a property lost or destroyed due to directly or indirectly to severe storms and flooding in an area that was declared a federal disaster between July 1st and October 15th. Whether this will include the properties that were destroyed and lost in Addison County, if they were destroyed or lost at a time when Addison County was not declared as a state of emergency.
I don't believe this bill would, and we were trying to put a fence around it because if we opened it up, it would just be a much larger impact on the ed fund. So we're doing essentially what we did under Irene, and it's trying to keep a control on the impact.
I'm just wondering if there was a way that you could have come up with language that would have defined, I completely understand the need for a fence, Mr. President. I'm wondering if there was a way, and when this bill was introduced, I had asked about this, if there was a way to create a fence that would have included some of the properties that were destroyed or lost in a county that was not declared a natural disaster.
We're trying to limit it. If we opened it up and said anybody who abated property that had damage during a rainstorm, we could pick up a lot of property, but I think we recognize the problem would be open to an amendment.
Okay, if there's a way we could come up with language that would help some of there are very specific places that this happened, so I think we could come up with language. But, for example, there was a house completely destroyed and lost to a landslide in Ripton on a date when no other properties were destroyed, but that property should have its property tax abated in the same way that anyone else who lost their house.
And I think the town still can, but as you said, now we're talking landslides. There were probably other landslides in Vermont. The landslide wasn't necessarily during the rain, so that opens it up. We were hoping to put this in all stages of passage today, but it still has to go through the other body. So if you can find an amendment, that might be.
Okay, I appreciate that. I understand the urgency. I will do my best to work with the other body, but I'd really like my constituents who were impacted as directly by the flooding in this summer, and the landslide was caused by excessive rain. It just happened on a day that other places didn't. It was micro rain. The poor town of Ripton had more rain than any other town in our state, and had heavily impacted a lot of properties in that town. And I just want to make sure that, unlike many other programs that have been implemented to help flood victims, that that this one would help.
This won't impact the victims. The town can still abate their taxes. This is providing it's helping the town. So depending on the amount of damage, one abated house in a town is not the impact of 20 and 30 and 40 houses in the town.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I will work with our colleagues in the other body to see if we can find a remedy. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington. Excuse me, Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. May I inquire of the reporter of the bill?
The senator from Washington is interrogated as the reporter of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. So just thinking about the situation that occurred in downtown Montpelier, where we had multi-story buildings that had their first floors destroyed, but did not see 50% of the loss of the value of the building because it was just the damage was limited to the first floor. So a lot of those properties have or are going to be abated, But my concern is that those properties are not going to be eligible as defined on page 2. And wondering if the reporter can speak to that.
Again, this was trying to put a box around this. We understand that big commercial buildings were only 30% damaged. We also had a lot of housing that was only 30% damaged. And we don't have the ability at present to do any kind of our own appraisal of the buildings to assure that they were 30% damaged. So this is what we've done in the past, it's what we're doing now. But we know there are a lot of places that had less than 50% damage that the towns are still on the hook for.
Thank you. My question also, I guess, further is, was there any consideration to simply adopting, because I hear the concern that you'd have to go through a lot of appraisals to do something with a finer comb, but another mechanism could be simply trusting the municipalities that the abatement that they are performing as a result of flooding could be covered by, or could become a part of the definition for an eligible property. Was any consideration given to adopting, just simply acknowledging that the municipalities are doing that work?
We talked about it. Again, this opens a whole relief much wider. It would be much more expensive on the ed fund. And the more money we give away in the ed fund, the higher the taxes are going to be on the affected properties. No, we didn't, because there is no real consistency in standards on in boards of abatement. They're one place we haven't done a lot of training, and so there's no standard for being able to rely on that.
I think the reporter of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I inquire of the reporter, I'd just like to say that we're all now aware of the new normal, and we're going to be seeing these microbursts across the state. We're going to see flooding on our rivers and streams. We're going to see property damage occurring that may or may not be provided for through insurance, and including our federal dollars. So I'd like to inquire of the report of the bill as Chair of Finance and ask if that we understand that there are significant insurance issues related to some of the things that underlie what's going on with reimbursement for damages that we will continue to see in a whole new weather system. So will your committee, or has your committee looked at opportunities for new insurance coverage going forward? Is there anything happening nationally? If you don't have the answer to this question, or internationally, I certainly understand if you haven't brought your research with you, but so that's my question. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was actually a timely question. The Finance Committee has the Department of Financial Regulation coming in to talk to us about flood insurance and insurance in general. I know they're studying during the flood what regular insurance and property casualty does not cover flooding. So most, I guess you can get private. I know someone who had a Lloyd's of London, but if you want to be eligible for FEMA, you have to have the federal flooding insurance. Given all, and that's been put in because private insurers, it started in California and Florida with fires and hurricanes and extreme damage that no private insurer could insure, at anywhere reasonable cost. And so this federal program was set up, but it's also feeling the stress of the amount of money in climate-related damage that's been done. So that again is, we're in a time of transition, and our insurance and everything that was set up for then is now transitioning to now in the future. So we're going to be doing a lot of watching and figuring out. But flood insurance is very expensive. Florida tried to do a self-insurance. It failed. And I doubt that Vermont is big enough to do that. So we'll be looking at it.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this is another indication, as the pro tem has indicated, of the responsiveness that we are making to floods in the state. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Chittenden Central.
I certainly feel for folks who are suffering from the effects of this year's flooding. I know the impact has been devastating to many. That said, in this unprecedented year, when school districts are losing federal COVID relief funds, which came in the form of ESSER and ARPA monies, healthcare insurance rates up approximately 16.5%, the culmination of many years of school infrastructure degradation, in part due to a moratorium on school construction aid, a costly PCB testing program, universal school meals, CLA, unprecedented CLAs. I cannot support an added burden on the ed fund, even if it is de minimis. Thank you.
Question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have ordered third reading of S 160, Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to reiterate, this is our first time speaking to the situation of the flooding victims, our first time to help them. It will not be the last. We will see these bills moving through our chamber this entire year, through the other body this entire year. So this is the first in a sequence of help we help to provide. With that said, Mr. President, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules to move S 160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage through all remaining stages of passage.
Now, the question is, shall the Senate suspend its rules in order to move S 160 through all remaining stages of passage? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have suspended your rules in order to move S 160 through all remaining stages of passage. Please listen to the third reading of the bill. Are there any amendments before third reading? Excuse me. Seeing none, please listen to the third reading of the bill.
S 160, an act relating to state education property taxes and flood-related damage.
Now, you've heard the third reading of the bill, and the question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay.
Nay.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed S 160. Are there any further announcements? Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message the actions just taken on S 160 and message those actions to the House forthwith.
Now, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate suspend its rules in order to message actions taken on S 160 to the House forthwith. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you've suspended your rules in order to message your actions taken on S 160 to the House forthwith. Are there any further announcements? Senator from Madison,
Are we doing announcements?
we are
Did say further announcements. Okay.
correct.
We're done with actions of orders of the day.
We are not. This
Oh,
is the first round of announcements. We often, at the end of the day, have a motion to adjourn till a date certain with another opportunity for
Okay,
announcements.
well, since I'm standing, I will. make an announcement. Thank you. I'm standing to provide some sad news to the Senate about a former colleague from the Addison District, Gary Gossens. Several of you served with him here in this body. He passed away yesterday morning at the age of 90. And I just wanted you to know, and I will forward along if I get any information about a service. But I just wanted to offer my condolences to his wife, Betsy, and just note that he was an honored member of this body. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have a joint Senate resolution on the Adjutant General to place on the calendar. Please listen to the first reading of the resolution.
JRS 38, joint resolution providing for a joint assembly for the election of an adjutant and inspector general and 2 legislative trustees of the Vermont State Colleges Corporation.
Now you've heard the reading, the first reading of the resolution will be placed on the calendar for action. We also have JRS 39. Please listen to the first reading of the bill, the resolution by title.
JRS 39, joint resolution establishing a procedure for the conduct of the election of 2 legislative trustees of the Vermont State Colleges Corporation by plurality vote by the General Assembly in 2024.
Now you've heard the reading of the resolution will be placed on the calendar for action on the next legislative day. We have one House bill for reference, H 560. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 560, an act relating to making technical corrections to workers' compensation rulemaking requirements.
Now you've heard the first reading of the bill is referred to the Committee on Economic Development, Housing, and General Affairs. We have no orders of the day, so I'd like to recognize the Senator from Chittenden Central.
Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I would move the pending announcements, the Senate stand in adjournment until 10 a.m. Tuesday, January 23rd. And if I might kick off the announcements.
The Senator may.
Just a few things scheduling wise for next week that I'd like to alert senators to. On Tuesday, we'll have the governor's budget address at 1 p.m. We will also, just a reminder, be voting on H 158, the bottle bill, in our session on Tuesday. Just a reminder about if you need to zoom in because you have a medical emergency or other covered emergency in our rules, please do notify the Senate Secretary's office in advance of our session so that they can have the equipment set up. And that allows a smooth start to our session. And then the last thing is that we will be having discrimination training in the Senate chamber also on Tuesday from 9 to 10. So it will be a busy day, so get some rest over the weekend. Thank you, Mr. President.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Essex Orleans.
President, if I could have some clarification about the scheduling on Tuesday.
If the Senator from Essex Orleans has an inquiry, thank you. Remain standing. The Senator from Chittenden Central is interrogated, I suppose.
Mr. President, just what time is the bottle bill coming up and what time is the training? It sounded like we have to be here earlier than what we normally would be.
Thank you for the clarification. The discrimination training is from 9 to 10. So it is in fact a half an hour earlier than we normally meet. And then our session will begin with the conclusion of that training. And I can tell senators that our override of the bottle bill will be first order of business that day.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Finance will meet at 1 o'clock today.
Senator from Bennington.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Education will meet at 1.
Senator from Madison.
Senator Box will also need it one. Thank you.
Senator from Caledonia.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Appropriations will meet at 1:30. A number of the committee members actually have a luncheon engagement with the Taiwan delegation. Thank you.
Senator from Essex Orleans.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate institutions will meet at 1 o'clock today.
Senator from Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to remind the senators that free COVID and flu shots are being administered in, I think it's room 33 on the second floor, and they're being administered until 1 o'clock. That 5-minute delay helped me get my COVID booster, which was great. I encourage you to go. They also have masses of tests, and increasingly, we're hoping people will be thoughtful if they feel under the weather to please test. So go get tests. They have lots and lots of them.
Are there any further announcements? Senator from Madison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been mulling over the conversation we had on S-160 and the inadequacy of a federal trigger, federal disaster area being declared. And when I think about many of our committees, from agriculture, economic development, that many of us are facing old ways of triggering provisions that are no longer keeping up with the change in climate. So I think I'm just, because it's so hard to speak to everyone at once, I'm thinking that maybe could ask the pro tem to put in our in-basket ways of thinking across the board of how we might need to structure new tools to help us deal with a changing climate, so that we don't run into a problem with the landslide being excluded, even though it's disastrous for that family. Thank you.
Are there any further announcements or points of personal privilege? Seeing none, the senator from Chittenden Central has moved that the Senate now stand adjournment until Tuesday, January 23rd at 10 a.m. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed indicate by saying nay. The ayes have it, and you'll stand adjournment until Tuesday, January 23rd at 10 a.m.